Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Engaging Rare Disease Patients in a Virtual World, 3 Real-Life Case Studies. This webinar is sponsored by TrialCard. TrialCard Incorporated provides patient affordability, medication access and adherence, patient support, and clinical trial services on behalf of pharmaceutical manufacturers. Founded in 2000, TrialCard has connected nearly 33 million patients with over 15 billion in branded drug savings to date. The company is headquartered in Morrisville, North Carolina. I'm Sean Edwards from World Congress. I'll be introducing today's webinar. Just a couple of announcements before we start. Participant lines are muted for today's session. However, if you'd like to submit a question for our speakers, please do so using the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer all questions that we have time to address during our session today. Also, please note that our session will be recorded and you'll receive an email with a link to the video so that you can view it again. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Michael Carlin is the General Manager of EngageHCP at TrialCard. Michael, thanks for being here. And to start us off, do you want to just say a couple words about what EngageHCP is?
Sure, Sean. But first and foremost, I want to thank you and World Congress for our partnership over the years and sharing information. We really appreciate it. And so thanks for helping us host this today. But to your question around EngageHCP, it's a suite of services here at TrialCard that we develop and execute healthcare provider sales and marketing programs that address the specific needs and challenges that our clients face. We employ a wide range of virtual representatives to gain access to healthcare providers. At essence, that's really what we do to help simplify access. We know access to healthcare providers is dramatically changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And even especially with COVID, it's even gotten worse. And moving forward, things will not be the same as they were in the past. We also know that healthcare providers still seek to know new and clinical information about the medications they choose for their patients. We provide that personal access through really virtual technology rather than going through the front door. One of our major focuses here at TrialCard is the rare disease market for all the important reasons. As we all know, rare disease are faced with different challenges than those of like large retail pharmaceutical brands. And we wanted to share with the audience today some of those learnings. So we hope that today, during the webinar, you'll get some valuable insights we've gained over the years in conducting these programs, or give some very specific case studies. We'll also share the examples specific to gaining awareness, locating rare disease patients, approaches and engaging healthcare professionals. And finally, we'll discuss the importance of nursing support after a patient's been put on therapy. We're going to hear from some of TrialCard's best here, been with us for quite some time, conducting these programs: Mason Brommer, Molly Boudelet, Debbie Doherty, and Heather Smith. So let me start by introducing Mason Brommer, who's currently the National Sales Manager, and he's played an integral role in the construction of our virtual rare disease platform, which we've launched in 2015. Mason will share a rare disease case study with us today. So let me just kick it off to Mason.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to talk about our team's work in rare disease, along with some shared learnings and successes we've had with several rare disease clients, some of whom continue to be valued partners with TrialCard for over 6 years, which is really cool. Perhaps for your rare disease community, what's brought the most value for our clients is the qualitative approach to deciphering which healthcare providers are currently treating patients with a rare disease, or in other words, finding those needles in a haystack. And while we recognize there's a growing number of programs offering telesales for pharma, especially in light of the pandemic, which forced a shift away from live sales to virtual engagement. But long before the pandemic, TrialCard conducted a pilot program to analyze the effectiveness of different types of virtual pharma sales representatives. This first case study we're going to review compared the success of a telepromotion representatives, which in this example is synonymous with call center agents, to pharma specialty sales representatives across 2 different rare disease states. The first rare disease state was a rare kidney disease that was somewhat known by physicians, relatively easy to explain and simple to diagnose. Whereas the second one was an ultra rare liver disease that was not well known, it was more complex, and it was challenging to diagnose. Let's take a closer look at the design of the program. This was a 3-month pilot. It was launched in the fall of 2015, and it incorporated 2 telepromotion representatives and 2 experienced pharmaceutical sales representatives. Their goal was to canvass and identify target specialty offices who've diagnosed patients with a rare kidney disease or ultra-rare liver disease. Once qualified, the team would transfer the leads to the client's field specialty representatives for deeper clinical conversations. Now, this integrated approach was indeed important, and one that equips specialists with the confidence and the resources they need to quickly identify, diagnose, and treat their patients. TrialCard's teams would lay the groundwork for the awareness and create opportunities for the client representatives to see specialists to enhance the disease awareness and educate the specialists on new treatment options. Let's take a closer look at the first set of results for the rare kidney disease, which proved to be equally effective across both teams with a combined 67 total identified patients, or a breakdown of 55% for the pharmaceutical sales representatives and 45% for the telepromotion representatives. So in contrast, with the ultra-rare liver disease, which uncovered a total of 7 identified patients, it required a much more scientific discussion that proved to be more effective from the pharmaceutical sales representatives. Some of the key learnings from this pilot included the following. Both programs were successful at identifying rare disease patients and pathways in the clinical setting. In this particular case, though, the pharmaceutical sales representatives were more successful when the discussion became more clinical, scientific, and focused in on the details of the rare disease, or in other words, when it required a lot more probing and deeper engagement. Based on these findings, TrialCard now offers 2 types of virtual specialty representatives: the telesales promotion representative and the rare disease professional that can augment the efforts of your field specialty teams. In summary, Michael, what I think is most important for your listeners to know is, regardless of the design of the program or the type of representatives deployed, our primary mission is to create pathways to finding these rare disease patients for our clients and their families. Now, the rest of today's discussion will be on the second cohort of TrialCard specialists, the rare disease professional. We'll show just how unique this approach is to finding rare disease patients is, and how we can help you to be successful in reaching your rare disease audience. Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, this pilot was conducted in partnership with a client, and it really reinforces the importance of matching the right virtual representative with the right clinical challenge. So it's that match that really provides the best results. You don't need to overdo it. You don't need to underdo it, but you got to make sure the skill sets of individuals on the virtual side are capable of delivering on the clinical side as well. And so now we'd like to hear from you in our first polling question. And so the question is, what types of services do you need to support your rare disease program? Disease market development, supporting your field teams, whatever field team that may be, post-launch like lead generation, white space or vacant territories, or last, assistance in gaining access. So give it a couple seconds, Sean, and see if we can't find out what we learned. All righty, let's take a look. Wow, I was thinking something different. So this is quite interesting to me. Market development, disease market development is always critical in rare disease. Also seeing that white space and post-launch is a little bit shorter. Supporting the field teams is really, no one selected that. And then gaining access. Well, that is really fundamentally what we end up doing here. So glad to see that that's a need and it could be met. So thank you all for sharing those questions. Next, I'd like to introduce 2 of our rare disease professionals, Molly Boudelet, as well as Debbie Daugherty. These 2 long-standing professionals, team members, have been with us here at EngageHCP for quite some time. And they want to show some real-world examples of how they help locate rare disease patients in partnership with our clients, of course. But first, introductions. Molly, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm delighted to be here today. Before I joined TrialCard, I worked in research administration, and I managed clinical trials and recruited participants for both nutrition and post-traumatic stress disorder research projects. I also managed a rare disease biosafety level 3 laboratory, and there we focused on prion disease such as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. So my knowledge of the clinical trial cycle from beginning to end, combined with an understanding of the world of rare disease and all of the attending challenges that come with it, really prepared me well to be a TrialCard rare disease professional.
All righty, thanks, Molly. Debbie, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, Michael, and good morning, everyone. Prior to joining TrialCard, I worked in 2 very different aspects of healthcare. I started my career as a respiratory therapist. I worked in a large teaching institution in critical care areas, ICU, NICU, burn trauma center. And then I made a career change into pharmaceutical sales, where my primary focus was respiratory, anti-infectives, and allergy. My customers were primary care physicians, specialists, and community hospitals. Having the experience of working as part of a healthcare team while caring for patients, coupled with my experience promoting medications for a major pharmaceutical company, really prepared me for my current position in rare disease.
All right, thank you, Molly and Debbie. Molly and Debbie have honed their skills necessary to be successful in the rare disease space. Let's hear from them on what this looks like. Debbie, you had a challenge reaching a very specific physician population in a large populous state. Can you describe the obstacles you faced and how you were able to manage a solution?
I can, but first I'd like to talk a bit about the program that I'm working on and the work that we're doing in rare disease. And then I'll share a little bit about that success in one particular state and how it came about. The client that I represent works in the area of ultra rare disease. The disorder occurs in 1 out of 350,000 to 410,000 births. Although I'll talk a bit more about that, what our team has found regarding incidence in a bit. There are 3 of us on the team, and we are the commercial arm of the organization, the sales reps, so to speak. We are responsible for 50 states and over 250 major institutions. Our goal revolves around 3 things. 1, raising awareness, 2, testing, and 3, treatment. We work each day to educate on this ultra rare disorder. Education raises awareness, and without raising awareness, there is little chance that a diagnosis will be made, or perhaps if it is, I hesitate to use this phrase, but it may be too late. Once our team delivers on the disease awareness piece, we then make certain that institutions have proper testing in place so these babies can be identified. Once a baby is identified, treatment is initiated. Drug treatment is the easy part of this triad. We work closely with our partners in managed markets so that initiation of therapy is seamless. In the rare disease space, it is really important that we help the client build their database. We always step back and ask who within an organization is critical for us to speak with, and where and how do we find them. With that, our main call points may be institutions, but in many cases, the specialists that provide support to these institutions may be outside of them. This leads to the second part of your question around the work I did with a large group in Florida. Florida has many tertiary care centers and NICUs that are very high priority. I knew that reaching all of them would be a challenge. I realized that a large number of these institutions, 16 hard to access institutions to be exact, were covered by a large physician-owned and operated medical group. The group wasn't in our database. I reached out to the group's corporate office via phone and email many times until I could connect with someone that would listen to my message regarding the importance of education around a very rare but devastating and fatal disorder. I was able to then arrange a meeting with our medical director and the physician CEO of the group, as well as 18 physicians that cover NICUs in 16 institutions throughout Florida. The presentation was delivered both in person and virtually. Following the presentation, several of the physicians were exploring a change in protocol at their respective institutions to include the measurement of specific biochemical markers to check for the disorder. Additionally, all information presented was included in the group's quarterly newsletter that was sent via email and hard copy to all providers. We are working on a follow-up meeting with the CEO of the group and our VP of Medical Affairs and another in-service in 2022. This is really just one example of the type of work we do in rare disease. There really is no template for this work. We know that our goal is to make sure that a diagnosis is never ever missed and each patient is given hope by having access to therapy.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. This is some real noble work in connecting really sick children to life-saving care. I know as a father that just it hits home a heart for making sure every child has good health. And what's important to note is that you did most all of this virtually, but there was some face-to-face here. So that is a part of individual models and needs. So thank you. Molly, your program is pretty different than the one that Debbie worked on. Can you please share with us how your approach has adopted different, not only for the medication, but for the healthcare professional?
Michael, the program that I work on is pretty different. So consider this, for just one client, I work on 2 therapeutics for 3 diseases, each of which affects multiple organ systems. So as you can imagine, the outreach is just enormous. And this might be unusual for some disease states, but for those of us who work in rare disease, we are very familiar with this scenario. And as you can imagine, this requires customized messaging as well as really in-depth medical knowledge across several subspecialties. So I'm currently working in 7 different specialty areas. And on any given day, I might be using multiple channels to connect with healthcare providers, each of whom will receive a singularly unique message on anything from patient profile to testing options to treatment pathways. And so while it really keeps me on my toes, it also reflects how a rare disease professional program can be tailored and really customized to meet a client's needs. So the rare disease professional is a really highly skilled expert. We have a lot of knowledge and training, but importantly, we're also very nimble. We can react to changing information and quickly adapt our approach, whether that's regarding something new about the disease state or a business development that might affect market direction. So the rare disease professional can change gears quickly with minimal disruption to work, all in order to maximize the efforts on behalf of the client.
Yeah, Molly, some companies focusing on rare disease assume or may assume that it's really a one only specialized physician subspecialty that are targets, if you will, to inform and educate. But it's really depending on the information and the products. Is it always the case that it is just that one sort of specialized doctor?
No. In fact, it's important to remember that although rare disease patients may end up in a large institution, they don't always start there. So it's important to educate community physicians on rare diseases, especially since one goal is always to shorten that diagnostic journey for the patient. And I have a couple of scenarios that really demonstrate this. So keep in mind, these outreaches were for the same disease, very different situations. So one physician was a geneticist in a very large institution. And we were in contact for over 2 years, communicating in several different ways, phone, email. He was understandably just too busy to meet in person. But I also suspect that he just wasn't really convinced about his need to address this particular disease just yet because it was so rare. But I patiently kept my messaging relevant. I provided updates and just stayed in steady contact. Over 2 years, we did this. And finally, we made a plan to meet in person. And this was going to be at a society conference. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and everybody knows what happened then. Everything was canceled. But wouldn't you know, shortly thereafter, a patient presented in his practice. But based on the relationship that we had built over those 2 years, having never met in person, he immediately recognized the disease. He knew who to contact, and we were able to get that patient on therapy without ever having connected in person. So what initially seemed like an incomplete connection actually turned out to be just what we needed to get to this patient, get the patient on therapy. And it's really just proof that exceptional messaging and good service really can work and be very effective. So we can contrast that with a very different scenario, same disease, different specialty. This was ophthalmology, and a very different practice. This was a solo practitioner in a busy but small community practice. Again, upon initial outreach, there seemed to be some reluctance based on the fact that the physician assumed that he may never encounter this patient type. Again, it's rare disease. It's hard to be convincing of that. But we had some communication back and forth, and the office agreed to a live lunch in service, which was great to be able to do that in the middle of the pandemic. I conducted the meeting, and as a result, this physician became a huge advocate of testing for the disease. He's actively looking for patients, and then beyond that, also agreed to be sort of a little community spokesperson for the disease, helping to update his colleagues in that area. So really, you know, the takeaway here is that one of the most common objections in rare disease work is that physicians just don't think that they're going to see these patients, whether their practice is big or small. But the truth is, we know that a patient can present in either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your approach to HCPs has got to be different. How do you know when to go one way or the other, your approach, or to change your approach once you hit a barrier or obstacle?
You know, sometimes messaging for one reason or another just falls flat. So I think I would answer that in two ways. I would say you can change the channel or you can change the message itself. So there are so many different ways to contact a healthcare provider. And this is something that the rare disease professional is very good at, and it takes a lot of creativity. So you can change the actual way that you get to the physician. The other thing is to change your message. So while one message may not resonate, another would. So maybe diagnostic tools aren't particularly interesting or catching a physician's attention. So you can try talking about statistics. Or if it's not the patient profile that resonates, maybe you use the experience of a colleague to sort of get the physician's attention. So variety in messaging is definitely important, and you just never know what's going to catch someone's attention or strike a chord with them. And then obviously underlying both approaches is just consistency and smart pacing in your outreach.
Yeah, it seems like these different approaches to solving are certainly needed, and the ability to switch back and forth is really key. Molly, your particular program has morphed quite a bit into a variety of different models, if you will. Can you explain to the audience the difference between what commonly termed as lead generation versus a service called gaining access? Because I think those terms get kind of muddied sometimes.
They do, and I have done both. So I tend to think of lead generation as painting the picture of an account to bring back to the client. So this is your intel gathering, and this can be on anything and everything that will maximize the client efforts to penetrate the account. So this could be identifying the best physicians to contact within a group who would most likely be the ones to see or treat your disease. This could be determining whether there is actually already a patient in the practice who has the disease. It could be anything from knowing who the gatekeepers are, knowing who the referring physicians are, anything unusual about the office. Do they have satellite locations? Are there unusual operating hours? Another thing that's really important to know these days are their policies around guests into the practice. So knowing all of this in advance, doing that lead generation really allows the client to cover more ground with greater speed and efficiency to access more accounts. And so lead generation is really the first step in engaging the account. It's really important work. By contrast, gaining access, that is painting the picture of the patient right to the account. So this would begin with all of the things you do for lead generation, but it goes further to actually deliver that disease state education, increase awareness of the patient profile, cover all of the testing and diagnostic options, and then also introduce the treatment protocol. So gaining access is really the complete cycle from education and awareness right through to therapy.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. We're going to turn into just go into a few questions that we commonly get with our clients about models and how we go about it. So just a series of 4 or 5 questions here back and forth to you, Molly and Debbie. So let me turn it over to you, Debbie. What relationship do you have with the client's field teams to drive results? And field teams being defined as really, it could be anything from the medical affairs side, it could be managed markets, it could be the sales side, it could be account management. There's all kinds of terms out there. How do you go about working with field teams organizations?
Well, first, I really want to reiterate that with the particular rare disease client that we represent, our team of 3 is the only commercial interface with HCPs. We are the field sales organization. With that, I work very closely with my medical director. We have a great relationship, and we work to drive awareness and testing. The 2 of us cover 22 states and talk several times a week to discuss which institutions, departments within institutions, and providers need more focus in terms of education. With our ultimate goal being that all institutions understand what to do in order to identify the disorder early. Every single hour matters for these babies, and we are so passionate about this. Together, we have in-serviced over 160 providers at some of the country's top NICUs, in addition to all the education that we are able to do via phone and email. We utilize our managed market partners with key institutions where education of the NICU clinical pharmacist is critical in terms of accessing drug.
Yeah, Molly, how about you in field teams? What interactions do you have?
So I work on a team of 2, and our positions are very much a hybrid approach. So I do manage my own accounts. I have full responsibility for them in every aspect, from initial contact right through the in-service and managing the ongoing relationship and needs for the account. I do also partner with the field reps, and I assist them in a variety of ways. This could be lead generation in advance of them going into a particular geographic area, especially if it's white space. We share insights on messaging, or I may help them get into a large institution that's particularly difficult. And there have even been times on a couple of occasions when I've taken a call from a field rep who's standing outside an office, unable to get in and see a provider. I can make a few phone calls to that office, deliver a compelling message, and then they are willing to let the field rep in the door. So field reps and rare disease professionals together are a really powerful tool.
Yep. working together. Well, here's a common question we get in probably our most common question, like how do you get past the gatekeepers, the receptionists, the call centers, these changing marketplace as far as health systems and changes, to have that deeper conversation with a healthcare professional? How about you, Molly?
Yeah, I've had the really good fortune to work elbow to elbow with gatekeepers in previous positions that I've held. So I know how busy they are. I know the stress they can be under. And I definitely understand the directives that they're given to really triage requests that come through. So, just be brief, be valuable, be understanding, and always be kind.
Yeah. How about you, Debbie?
As I mentioned, I've worked on both sides. Early on in my career, I took care of critically ill patients, always with a sense of urgency and compassion, followed by many years of pharmaceutical sales. This has given me a very, very unique perspective. I always, in the words of Stephen Covey, seek first to understand. And so with each call, I try to do just that. Be genuine and be patient-centric are my golden rules on each and every call.
Yeah. So another question here is, are you really able to influence physicians and prescribers, healthcare professionals to diagnose or test or even get patients on therapy? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, so I'm not one for those sort of salesy one-liners, but honestly, if you can demonstrate the need and then generate the excitement and the want for your testing and your therapy, you really can develop a physician advocate in any type of office setting. And the question is, how do you do that? Just really in general, you provide exceptional information, you reinforce your advantages, demonstrate confidence in your treatment options, and it all has to be combined with emotional intelligence.
How about you, Debbie?
Simple answer is yes, we do influence physicians and their behaviors. How do we do it? How do I do it? Conviction in the words that I use and how I deliver them. I mentioned earlier that the program that I represent involves an ultra-rare disorder. However, just in the last year, through our efforts, babies are being diagnosed at a rate much higher than the literature suggests, which is most likely due to our efforts around awareness. My messaging is for the babies and the parents of these babies each and every time. A nurse said to me recently, it may be rare, but it is 100% if it is your baby. I'm sure to point out that albeit rare, we never know where or when a baby will present. The disorder is fatal. A simple test may change the outcome for the baby and the family. Again, it really is all about the patient.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Thank you. How about switching over to the pandemic? Staff shortages, access challenges how they affected your routines and or your challenges, successes? How about you, Molly?
I've been working virtually for 6 years. So this was well before the pandemic hit. And the virtual airwaves are certainly more crowded now. But I can honestly say it has not greatly affected my work or the outcomes of my team, which we are really proud of. And I just take that as evidence that our messaging has always been and remains compelling. I'm definitely aware of and sympathetic to the additional burdens of healthcare providers, what they're facing working through the pandemic. So one key is to remain very flexible in how you connect with them.
Yeah. Well, great. Molly and Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your insights on solving really unique challenges in the rare disease space. I know all of us working in rare disease understand that diagnosis is a big part of the patient, for the patient and for the family, and a big part of the story. And then the selection of medication is really another big step into it. But it's that adherence to that medication protocols and the follow-up is really critically important too. So now I want to turn it over to the nursing component or follow-up services that can help assist in that. And so I'd like to introduce Heather Smith, Senior Program Director here at TrialCard. Heather would tell us, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Heather, and then we'll talk about what you do.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate being a part of this, this webinar today. So thank you for inviting me. About myself, when I think about rare disease, I've definitely grown to love rare disease. And when I think back about my career, I see rare disease as actually always being present as part of my career. I started off at the bedside as a clinical nurse, and much of my time as a nurse was spent in the neonatal intensive care unit. And of course, there, as other of my colleagues have spoken about, I was able to see firsthand babies being diagnosed with rare diseases, some for which came from us utilizing the newborn screen and other tests that have evolved over time to diagnose patients with rare diseases. And, I stepped away a little bit from the bedside to go receive formal education to become a neonatal nurse practitioner, and eventually become gain my PhD in nursing as well. I'm still staying at the bedside though, to some degree. And when I came back after my formal education, after my PhD, I jumped into the industry space and worked for a pharmaceutical company where 100% of my time was actually focused on supporting a patient population with a rare GI disease. In that space of running clinical studies, pharmacovigilance, and medical affairs responsibilities. And so coming now here to TrialCard after I've been here a few years, overseeing patient support programs with various rare diseases, it is just a great opportunity to see those common themes that no matter which therapeutic area, a rare disease has a very specific, unique way that presents itself in patients and healthcare providers. And so I appreciate the opportunity to work with those families and healthcare providers.
Yeah. So why are nursing searches then so important in rare disease? I mean, it seems obvious, but a little more granularity on that. Well, why is it so important?
Sure. So nurses can really help within the rare disease space in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, of course, the patients. When my experience in touching, coming into contact with patients and families, caregivers with a rare disease diagnosis, they've been on this journey, typically many years of a journey, and that diagnosis is a milestone in their life. And in some ways, there's relief that comes with that diagnosis, and yet there's so many more questions that that patient or family may have. And nurses can really help listen and also provide guidance and help and support across, hearing their story. Oftentimes, I would say they want to be able to tell their story. And many of these stories are, heartbreaking to hear. But when you recognize where they've come and where they need support, nurses can jump in and facilitate for them. Whether that be connecting them with maybe an advocacy group, or just checking in with them to make sure that they're doing, well, and they're set and they don't have any other further educational needs. Certainly, these patients might be in a space where they can't absorb all the information at once. And so giving them nuggets of knowledge over time is really helpful for them, whether it's about the disease or the medication that they've been prescribed. And so nurses can be a wealth of information to take the time and provide that to the patient and their family so that they feel that they're supported and can benefit from the drug that they've been prescribed. The other group, of course, is supporting healthcare providers. If it sounds like a horse, it's a horse. You might often hear that. But in the rare disease space, many of these healthcare providers may not see any patients with this rare disease, as Molly and Debbie have mentioned. And so, taking a nurse and having peer-to-peer conversations to inform healthcare providers can be extremely valuable in sharing that knowledge and information so that as time progresses, especially when they have that patient, they can consistently provide great care to that perhaps one patient that they may have And in the end, it's the patient who will benefit from that superb care that healthcare provider can give. And we've seen how our nurses here at TrialCard can provide that unique care to patients. And I'm excited to say that our observations have turned into now the opportunity for us to also provide nursing services to healthcare providers through clinical nurse educators. So that provides us a really great opportunity to not only serve patients and caregivers, but also the healthcare community as well.
Yeah, great. Well, when and how often are nurses, like when do you get involved in the care journey typically with the patients and family?
Sure, we really want to engage with those patients pretty quickly after diagnosis, after we understand that they've been prescribed a product. Again, like I said, they switch from I don't know what's going on to now I have a diagnosis, and making sure that all of their questions, usually many questions, are answered. So we want to jump in there within a few days, contact them pretty quickly. Typically, we want to reach out to them often, especially in that first month or so, depending on the needs of the patient, but also weighing in with the complexity of the drug itself. We will often customize or tailor our outreach to patients so that we can ensure that if there are any milestones we would expect to see, that we're there to show them that we are supporting them. The other piece too is that we want to make sure that they understand the medication regimen. Some of these medications, because of technology evolving, can be pretty complex. And so ensuring that they're able to understand, they only take it on certain days of the week, or there's fasting involved, that they feel confident in moving forward with taking that medication.
Yeah. So, I mean, and last question here, Heather, for you is around that doctor's visit. Is that enough? I mean, why provide the additional services? Is it that critical?
Sure. So research will show that patients have about 15 to 25 minutes of time with their healthcare providers. Again, going over test results, providing a diagnosis, and sometimes, again, that diagnosis that might be the first time that comes out of a physician's mouth to a patient is unknown territory. Those patients may not be in a place, if time allows, for them to understand the education that then is given to them during that time frame. So walking away, needing more information is certainly what we expect in the rare disease space, not only to the patients, but also to the physicians, where everyone in this rare disease space truly needs additional support. And I think that's very much expected in the rare disease space, and nurses can absolutely fulfill that need.
Absolutely. So thank you, Heather. It really takes a whole team of healthcare providers across the patient journey for successful health and care outcomes. So thank you. I'm just going to put a closing statement here together and say, we hope that you have found this discussion both valuable and gained some insights into rare disease, various different approaches and different challenges. TrialCard's committed to the rare disease space and segment, and we really know that it takes dedicated and motivated team members to be successful in conducting these types of programs. I'd like to thank our panel today, Mason, Debbie, Molly, and Heather, not only for participating in the webinar, but really the work you do each and every day. It is noble in my mind, and you really do help make patients' lives much better. We would be happy to discuss anyone in the audience or challenges you may be facing in this space, and see if there's ways we could work together on solving solutions. So that's going to bring a close to the official part of the presentation or webinar here. And now, Sean, I don't know if we've got some questions that are chatted in that we can answer.
We do. First question, why would a client need your services when their specialty representatives are equipped to work virtually or in person?
And Michael, Sean, I can handle that.
Okay, you take it, Mason.
Yeah, first of all, we're not suggesting that our rare disease professionals would replace your sales force, but rather augment their efforts to save time, to work smarter, and to gain greater traction and enrich the education and engagement with HCPs. I feel blessed in the fact that I've worked on 6 different rare disease programs over the past 6 years, and we haven't lost one program due to the lack or poor performance. And it's because we hire highly successful track records of success representatives, and we provide them with the tools and the engagement, and we train them very similarly to your specialty representatives as well. So we really feel they work hand in hand with your specialty representatives to help patients and their families.
Thanks, Mason. Sean, any others?
Yeah, where do you envision your team having the greatest impact for clients and their medications?
I'm happy to respond to that as a rare disease professional. You know, I always say that there's no room for boasting in rare disease. It is all hands on deck all the time. I would just encourage any client to step back, look at what your needs are, be honest about them, present them, and then know that your you know, the work that we do will specifically meet those needs, and also, as I've said before, really be able to adapt as your needs change with an ongoing project. So it could be lead generation, where we do some of the work up front and hand it over to a sales team. It could be actually getting in there and running in services for your team. It could be gaining access. We really are able to provide solutions to any number of the challenges that you might face.
Thanks, Molly.
Got it. And another question: what do you feel has been the biggest contributor to the RDP success?
I'm happy to take this one, Michael. I can say for our team, and I'll speak for Molly's as well. I think when we make these calls, when we reach out to customers, providers, nurses, physicians, the first thing that we think about is our own family and what we would want for them. So that's an important piece. But if I had to sum it up in just one word, I would say our passion. We're really patient focused on each and every call. And our mission has always been to do whatever it takes to educate, raise awareness, and assist physicians in shortening the diagnostic journey for their rare disease patients. I had a manager once say to me that you had to hear no 3 times before you accepted it as an answer. And I think for us, it's a much bigger number than 3. We do not give up on these programs, and we do not give up because we care so much about these patients.
Great, Debbie, thank you. Sean?
Okay, just a final question on any insights, Michael, from you or the panelists on what's ahead or what you see as the future of HCP engagement.
So yeah, thanks for the question. The future HCP engagement here at TrialCard is very bright. I will say that their demand and need for accessing healthcare professionals to share new and relevant clinical information is ever more important. The pandemic has certainly showed us a different way of model of working, and that's why we are investing a lot of time and energy into this particular space, both in rare disease as well as for different brands and different life cycles. So we've gone through quite a bit of expansion here and and that's why I want to continue to invest in this space. So I'm happy to engage with anybody in the audience that has a challenge that we'd like to help solve. So any other questions there?
No, I think that sums it all up. I want to thank you, Michael, and all of our panelists for being with us today, the TrialCard HCP team, and thanks for making today's session possible. Just a reminder, everyone, today's webinar has been recorded. You'll receive an email with a link to the video so that you can view it again. And thanks again for joining us. Have a great day. And this now concludes today's discussion.
All righty. Thanks, Sean, and thanks, World Congress.